we're 1 or 2 years away from swarm technology. So drones, converging on a point as a swarm from every direction. Once you have this swarm technology, you could just release 10,000 drones into New York City, and without any defenses, you're screwed.
Welcome to For Humanity, an AI Risk podcast, episode number 73, After the AI Frankenstein Twitches. I'm John Sherman, your host and the president of the AI Risk Network. Thanks so much for joining me. On this channel, our mission is to make AI extinction risk kitchen table conversation on every street as fast as possible before it's too late. If you support that mission, I need you to hit like, I need you to subscribe, and if you can, donate. Link in the show notes. Like all the shows on the AI Risk Network, this show is for everyone, for the general public, no tech background required. So this week, friend of For Humanity, Esben Kran, returns to the show. He joined me from Kyiv, Ukraine for our interview. Esben, aside from having just about the best personal energy of anyone in tech, is a leader in the growing for-profit AI safety industry. I was at an AI conference in New York a few weeks ago, and a panelist said that until AI safety was a product, it would never change the world, that everything that's truly changed the world has been a commercial product. So Esben was in Kyiv meeting leaders of dozens of autonomous drone companies. Here are a few images from his trip. So what do drones have to do with AI safety? Right now, the AI Frankenstein is still lifeless on the table. But what about those first few moments when the Frankenstein's fingers first start to twitch? What would humanity do to protect itself in that moment that may be rapidly arriving? That is AI safety too. So here is my conversation with Esben Kran. Be sure to stick around afterwards for some exciting announcements. Esben Kran, welcome once again to For Humanity. So glad to have you, my friend.
So glad to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes. So as we were getting ready to do this recording, my studio fell on top of itself and the camera went crazy and all the wires went crazy, and then we fixed it and we're back, and you are in Kyiv. And here this morning we thought you were going to have the problem recording, but in fact it's me in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Such is life. We fixed it. We made it. So I am super excited to have this conversation. You are, I think, one of the leaders in the for-profit AI safety industry, the fledgling for-profit AI safety industry. Had you on the show one time before. You were kind enough to invite me out to San Francisco, came out and we hung out and went to a conference you put on. And it was really cool learning about some really cool AI safety for-profit companies. And now you are in Kyiv, Ukraine, going around Odessa, different places in Ukraine right now, learning about for-profit AI safety companies and the industry. And so I want to hear all about it. But I want to start you out just at the top. I was at a conference in New York, and a guy on the stage said, it's all important like AI guys. He was like, the only thing that really changes the world are products. And until AI safety is a product, it's not really going to change the world. And I was like, yikes, that sounds rough, but to you, it probably sounds promising because you are sort of immersed in this world. So what do you think about that idea?
I actually think, it hits a very important point. And it's one that I think requires a bit more analysis than what has been given until now. But basically this concept that we're in a world where the technology, as it happens, sets the prerequisites for what the world will do, So if I'm a politician and I need to enact export controls on GPUs that are sent to China, for example, I need something that can verify that the GPU is not in China. And this is a technology. And if that technology isn't available, then it's just not going to be possible for me to pull that lever at all. So in that sense, I actually really do get the comment. I obviously also think that there's a lot of work on every other side than product development to make sure that AI goes well for humanity. So definitely an important point, and I do think that technology in many cases comes before the actions that we can actually take.
Sure. And the line that I throw out sometimes is like, with current AI models, is like, we're building cars without brakes. So it might be a good idea to also have a braking company
exactly
alongside your cars without brakes company. right? Like,
yeah, and I mean, one example of this that I think it's a bad example because it doesn't actually fulfill the purpose of brakes, but is that brakes, they were invented and every car got them. It wasn't like a crazy innovation that I kept to myself under a patent and controlled, and then I built my brake startup. No, I made sure every car company could use it, so we save human lives. And in a similar scenario you have with Anthropic, did this with the Model Context Protocol, if you've heard of this. It's basically like a tool set to make sure that agents can interact with other APIs, websites, etc. in healthy ways, whatever that might mean. It is not a security-first protocol. We saw a big leak because of it recently. But these kind of projects that are shared between labs, where OpenAI now also is compatible with the Model Context Protocol, even though it came out of a hackathon at Anthropic. So I think the apt statement there is somewhat the seatbelt as well. I think Toyota or Volvo or some car company invented it, and then we're like, yeah, everyone take it because it's gonna make the world safer, and they didn't earn any money off it. Of course, then.
It's like you can't have an AI company without AI safety, right? Like the lack of safety is a giant tail risk to the entire AI enterprise.
Yeah. I think very interestingly, we see with some of the companies that create these scaffolds, agent scaffolds or agent companies, there's loads of those around, right? Like any company you've checked out their website where they can automate your email or something like this. And it turns out that, okay, they developed these protocols that improve the performance of the model in this narrow domain. And there are two kinds of developments in this category. One is the capability scaffolding. So basically, okay, what tools do I give it access to? What can it do? How can it think? How does it like loop on itself? And the other is the security scaffolding. And very interestingly, all of this scaffolding becomes irrelevant when the new model comes out, because suddenly GPT-5 or whatever can now do the task that all of your capability scaffolding was meant to do. And then the security scaffolding is the only thing that scales. So I think this is a very, very technical reason and argument for the point you make. And then secondly, I might have mentioned it last time as well, but this point that in finance, 20% of all expenditure is spent on assurance. So this insurance, different ways to categorize risk in financial assets and so on. And this is also the case for cloud and cloud security as comparative industries. And I think it'll be even bigger with AI, because when the main expenditure is this training of the AI, then the rest just becomes alignment, security, and this security scaffolding.
How outrageous is it that finance has 20% secured for finance safety-ish, but finance can't really kill you? And here we have the world's most dangerous technology ever that has no similar carve-out at all.
To some degree, it definitely doesn't have a carve-out, and I think the industry is extremely nascent, so there's nothing to spend money on outside of your own company. But I do know that Anthropic has one of the largest security departments of the big labs, and you also have a lot of spending with some companies like Lakera, who provided these like barriers between the user and APIs, where you actually do already see a lot of spending. You can argue, and I think it's somewhat wrong to argue, but you can argue that research on alignment, so just making it useful for business purposes, making sure it doesn't think it's Mecha Hitler or something like this, is also actually a security line item. But that's up to the interpreter, I think.
Yeah. So I want to get all into the stuff you've been doing out there in Ukraine, but first let's talk for a moment about when I was in San Francisco and I was at the Selden event. There was so cool. Saw a couple of the companies that you have been sort of incubating and getting to the point where they're going to be viable and successful on their own. And I want to just talk about two of them really quickly. Let's talk about Christian's company and Luke's companies just really briefly, because I sort of been talking about them out in the world. I think they're so interesting. So Christian's first, tell us what the company is called and what it does.
So Christian's company is Lucid Computing, and Christian is a former founder. They had $12 million per year in revenue there before he left it to start this company. And it's basically designing original hardware that goes together with data centers and GPUs to make sure that we can actually attest to both what's going on the GPU, but also where it is and all these other things that will be both relevant for compliance, but also relevant for me to trust that my data is secure with a provider. If I, for example, put an algorithm that's worth $100 million to me on AWS Bedrock, which is like they claim a lot of security, then what is Amazon's incentive to actually try to steal that without me knowing? And I don't know. And there's a few different features on GPUs today that you can use, but they're gonna develop a very big stack for this. And then
it was like the idea that everybody's going to want to know where their data is being dealt with, like the sort of idea of sovereignty around your data security, the sort of chain of custody around your data, and that nation states are, the U.S. government is not just going to send its data off to like server X in ? Place. And if you create a world where they know there's assurance your data is secure, the entire chain of custody, that's a different world.
Yeah, and then you mentioned as well Luke's company, Workshop Labs.
Yeah.
And Workshop Labs, they're basically working from this thesis that humans are not going to be the dominant labor force of the future. And so when you have this ownership of AI from very, very few individuals, like 0.1% of the population, private equity firms that own part of OpenAI, that own the models or whatever, then you end up in a world where you lack this social mobility. Because today, the value of a human in a capitalist society, within the money realm, not within the human value realm, of course, is the economic value of their labor. And so I can negotiate with a CEO about, okay, what is my value as a laborer, and then go off from there. And so what they've been working on is actually that, you can maybe even work with unions, but work with others as well to develop these personalized models where it takes my workflow data and I own that data and I own the resulting models. And they run on confidential compute. So something that Lucid Computing, could enable even more of. So I'm sure that they're not taking it for themselves. And then I create this AI that's great at the things I'm great at, and people can commission this to do the tasks. So, moving from the top 0.1% owning the world to 5%, maybe, if we're lucky. Yeah,
no, it's so cool because we all, we're all putting all our data into the models and just like feeding the Borg. And it's like, you don't have to do that. And it's a world where you could create, one of the cool things about that company is Luke talks about how you'll actually be able to write like you, like not just kind of like poorly like you, but actually in a way that convinces you this model can actually write in my style convincingly. And that is a threshold I don't think any of the models are really at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they have a phenomenal team, and I've seen their R&D, and it's pretty awesome. Like, it actually works. It does sound like me. And they've done it on other writers as well.
Yeah. We'll put links to both those companies in the show notes because they're really cool and everybody can check them out. All right, so you have been out in Ukraine looking at drones and all kinds of things, and I think threshold question is like AI safety, drones. Where do these two meet? And there's certainly, like we talked about, there's some discomfort around the defense industry in the AI safety world, but I think you've got some really interesting thoughts about where it all comes together.
For sure. Yeah. The big reason I'm in Ukraine is basically that there is this kill chain, or whatever you want to call it, of existential risk. Like, how will an autonomous, generally intelligent superintelligence actually destroy humanity or destroy society in one way or another? And there's a few different steps there. Some of them are related to, engineered pandemics. Some of them are related to causing destabilization, right? Like polarization, misinformation, manipulation, addiction. And then another is causing war and helping countries do war in an autonomous fashion. But then one of the big ones that I think everyone will be aware of when I say Terminator or whatever is this concept of autonomous killer robots. These are also called slaughter bots, and are robots that can kill robots or drones that can kill humans without any human in the loop. And this human in the loop principle is an old NATO principle that all NATO countries currently adhere to. We'll see how long that lasts in a war situation, of course. but that there always has to be a human clicking the trigger button. And so where this all comes together in Ukraine is really to understand what is the state of the art, right? Like how has technology changed over the last few years of the war, the last 3 years, to a degree where in the beginning it was just tank convoys, and today it is all drone against drone, anti-aircraft against drone. It's all these kind of things instead. And I think this extreme speed of development is completely invisible to both anybody in the AI industry, anybody in AI safety, and like, interestingly enough, also most of the people outside of Ukraine, which is why I went here. So I've had the honor and opportunity to chat with a bunch of the people creating the equipment for the front line and see a few manufacturing facilities as well. Completely, I'll keep it all secret, of course, but yeah. I can talk about non-specific stuff. And they are basically, they have the takes from the front line. They have the end users that are right now using these in warfare and understand where the capabilities are heading. And so this is really where I think we cannot ignore this, no matter how, unsavory the defense industry looks to a normal, moral, ethical person. And we have to engage with this and understand what are the defenses we have against AI and autonomous robots, and what are the kinds of state of the art within the robot industry itself.
So interesting. Okay, so first of all, when I think of Ukraine and Kyiv, I don't think of like industry or like startups or, new tech or, I sort of envision they're getting like dusty crates of old stuff from various militaries, and they crack them open and they look in there and they're like, well, how can we use this missile launcher or this grenade thing or this. But you were saying that there is like a burgeoning industry in Ukraine, in Kyiv, where entrepreneurs, technical people are getting together and working on products that can be used on the battlefield like immediately, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
that's wild. Yeah.
Indeed. And it stems from a few years ago where, funnily enough, I'm Danish, but it's unrelated to me being Danish, but the Danish government actually pledged like $2.7 billion, I believe, to purchasing equipment from only Ukrainian-based companies, and then helped set up an incubation system for the whole industry to emerge. And so it's a very burgeoning, very, very new, and just now like reaching that hinge of maturity where you can begin working with them seriously, and they can begin scaling into civilian tech as well after the war. But also that they are just the absolute peak of technology today. So some of the very interesting points here, I think some of the most eye-opening comments have been when they have received equipment from Helsing, the like German Anduril, or received they see marketing videos from Anduril themselves, these like the big name defense startups out there today.
Yeah.
It's pretty useless. And it's very interesting to hear and see. So they've received drones that cost 25,000 euros, and they can build that themselves for $500. And it's not and there's no reason to use these drones because they also don't work. And so there's definitely this comparison between like, okay, they are at the front line. They know what the end users need. And it's, the same, the old startup advice of always talk to your users. And I think for the most part, Anduril and Helsing probably aren't talking to real users, but are talking to government bureaucrats or something like this. So that's been some of the very interesting stuff. So it's much more at the forefront than it is there.
Yeah. And you're talking about like a feedback loop from the battlefield to the lab that is probably like same day texting, just immediate. And so what kinds of innovation is happening out there with this stuff?
Yeah, so I can talk about some of the manufacturing facilities I've been at, but in general, the whole drone manufacturing industry is very big. So they are building thousands of drones every day in Ukraine, like Ukrainian made, Ukrainian sourced, etc.
Wow.
And they're building
thousands
some of them
every day.
Advanced.
Thousands every day.
Yeah, indeed. And they're planning to do even more, right? So I think their goal is 100,000 per month for the country as a whole. And so that will be 3,000 per day or something like this.
Wow.
And there's about 27 companies working on this, and there's a few massive ones. There's some conglomerates now like merging 3 or 4 different companies. So it's really, it is turning into a military industrial complex.
Absolutely fascinating. What is the how many drones do they lose a day? Like if they're trying to create those numbers, and are most of them suicide drones? Like they hit their target and they explode, and then there's nothing left?
Yeah, so you have a lot of different drones, and I think it's very interesting to know what this state of the art looks like, because drones are the main front of the battlefield. There's a few, car-looking robots that are coming into use and so on, but they're usually compared to drones. And so the drones that are being built today are like a lot of kamikaze drones, so a lot of these suicide drones that have strapped down explosives, go towards target and explode. And then a bunch, like a minority, because they're very expensive and difficult to build, are these, for example, the Vampire class of drone within the Ukrainian manufacturing industry, which are like heavy payload deployment systems. And they even have these anti-radio jammers, so 50 kilometers on either side of the war zones right now, you cannot use any radio because there's jammers everywhere. Every single square inch is jammed, so there's no use of radio frequencies.
Wow.
But then you have these targeted radio frequencies that they can basically switch between a lot of the frequencies and then make it work anyways. And so these are the kinds of like attack offense balances that are constantly playing out on the battlefield.
And without going into too much detail, like what does it look like to run an entrepreneurial drone company in the middle of Kyiv in the middle of a war? Like, is it, you go through a bakery and then there's a bunker and then you get in there and then there's like this James Bond lair where dudes in lab coats are walking around with like, shiny metal parts or something? Or is like, what does it actually look like to walk into these places?
Well, that's approximately correct. So one of the facilities I got into, basically, they give us an address. We like park there and we have to log our passports and stuff to this guy that comes in another big SUV and scans them and so on. And then he drives us to the spot where the facility is, and then we're able to check it out. And it's a bunch of dudes in a garage just rebuilding a cannon or something like this,
Wow.
And these are the kinds of setups you have. It has to be the secret because otherwise Russia is going to find it.
So let's talk about this kill chain. And I think, it's useful in that a lot of times, when you talk to people about AI risk, one of the biggest questions they have is like, well, how would AI actually kill us? And what I always say is that the limits of our imagination are not the limits of what is possible in the physical world. So, you have to understand that Roman Yampolsky has a great way of talking about it. He's been talking about that basically like, what does your dog think you could do to kill it? And it's like, probably all it thinks you could do is bite it to death. And so that's our understanding of the sum total ways that AI could kill us probably fall under the umbrella of like biting, from the understanding of a dog. But I think you go through a multi-step thing that is really instructive and seems very real, based on what we actually know and what is actually out there. Like if you had to say, using known things, how could AI actually kill us? I think this kill chain is really instructive.
Well, what happens once we know that an AGI has taken over? Well, okay, we shut all internet off across the whole world. Okay, well, what does AI do to that? What are all the different plans that they can do? Okay, well then we have to go around with security teams that shut off every computer and pull out every kind of Ethernet cable, and you make connection. You make fiber optic cables and cables in general like a completely forbidden good to buy, because then AI could instruct humans that are in love with them or whatever to connect computers and build a new network. And then what's the next thing after that? And so it just continues where you can then get a lot of different interesting solutions out of it. So, and then I think the most tangible right now is definitely the most tangible and the one we can maybe do the most about, and the one that is also maybe least discussed, is this problem of autonomous weapons. And because of the reasons we mentioned before, where I think, for example, an example of what could go wrong, even just at human hands as a terrorist, would be, and that's what I hear from people here, in Ukraine is basically that we're 1 or 2 years away from swarm technology. So drones, converging on a point as a swarm from every direction, and you can deploy 10,000 of those, and they can select their targets, and they can just fly in, and you have no chance of stopping them if it's a valuable enough target. And so if we imagine that Ukrainians can build drones in their basement or behind the bakery, as we said, here during a war where they are blocked from many imports, then a terrorist group could do the same in New York City, right? Like a group of people could get together, assemble a bunch of parts that are readily available and today easily exportable from China to the US, put it together into a drone, and the only thing you'd have to smuggle would be some dynamite or that you can maybe even build at home. I won't talk about that, but there's ways to do it. And it doesn't take a genius to do it. And so once you have this swarm technology, you could just release 10,000 drones into New York City, and without any defenses, you're screwed. New York City, you will just have 10,000 deaths as a result. Maybe not 10,000, but you'll just have a lot. This is the risk we're talking about. And so I sort of envision this security first world we're entering that I think I also spoke about at the conference you joined, but this point that every single piece of our infrastructure in our society will have to be rebuilt, not with the layer of security on top that is currently the case, but with security at the absolute root of every single design decision. And so in this way, every one company I looked at was building sensor networks that could unify all sensor data for both auditory, basically microphones hearing drones, radar seeing drones, and classifying them based on what they look like when you do Doppler radars or something like this, and whatever other devices you want to use for it, even lasers, IR scanners, all these things, and can fuse this and then can create a whole network of these that cover a massive area. So they've got hundreds of sensors across Ukraine now, then each covering 75 square kilometers basically. And so if you could set that up in New York City, you would now know that there's 10,000 drones the second they fly out the window or whatever. Okay, that's step one, detection. And then you classify it, right? You might is this 10,000 birds that's suddenly flying out of?
Just real quick, Esben, just to point one real quick. There's currently no way to detect this is happening in Kyiv, so it could be today, it could be happening in New York tomorrow, literally tomorrow. There could be someone with 10,000 drones they made explosives. They're going to send them in a pack somewhere to do some coordinated thing. And we literally have no detection, no visibility, no nothing right now.
When I was 15 years old, I decided I wanted to be a TV news reporter. There are 4 major national awards a TV news reporter can win: the Peabody, the DuPont Columbia, the National Emmy, and the National Edward R. Murrow Award. Before I was 33 years old, I had won all 4 as a local news reporter investigating Chesapeake Bay polluters.
Reporter John Sherman will accept the Peabody.
John Sherman.
But I left news in 2010 when the internet was really starting to radically change the news business. Now, algorithms dictate much of what we see, and in turn, much of what we think. That's why I am so excited today to talk to you about Ground News, the founding sponsor of the AI Risk Network and For Humanity, an AI Risk podcast. I first heard about Ground News when I noticed them sponsoring many of my favorite podcasts, but true confession, I never used the service until they approached me about sponsoring this podcast. So I tried it, and truly, I have been blown away. It is a fundamentally different way to consume news. Okay, next true confession. Before Ground News, I used to use Twitter to get all of my news from. My thought process was I'm reading the major publications and I'm reading the major writers, so, how bad could it be? It was really bad, way worse than I thought. If you see anything often enough, it becomes normal, but these algorithms kind of lull you to sleep, and you lose your perspective, and I realized that was exactly what was happening to me. Ground News pulled back the curtain for me. Even for me, with 12 years experience working at news, it revealed things not just about the news itself, but about the way it was being covered that I wasn't really able to see. Sensationalism and bias were sneaking past my radar, and I didn't even know it. Ground News lets me compare headlines and know going in the biases of the publication, so before I ever read a word of the article, I understand the frame around it much better. So as an example, let's take the historic defeat of big tech in the US Senate when the proposed 10-year state AI law moratorium was crushed by a vote of 99-1 at 4 a.m. Ground News gives me 270 articles in one place, but then it gives me a distilled bias comparison. For me, I spend a ton of my time trying to think about how to effectively communicate with the general public about AI extinction risk. So this bias comparison shows me how the left was framing it up around environmental impacts, where the right was framing it around states' rights. That is really informative to me as I try to form my opinions and make decisions about how I'm going to communicate about AI extinction risk with the general public going forward. I also absolutely love this feature called Blind Spot. It shows you what stories are being covered super heavily by one side. These are stories in your algorithm you just might miss because you don't know they're out there. So, if you want to support the AI Risk Network, there is nothing more powerful you can do in terms of showing your support than subscribing to Ground News and using our custom code. There's a QR code right here. There's the URL right here. It's ground.news/AI risk. They will know everyone who's using that came from right here. It's incredibly important that we ring that bell a lot and get a lot of subscribers into Ground News. So please go sign up, do it. You'll be glad you did. Ground News and the AI Risk Network want to form a long-term relationship and partnership, but that depends on one thing: our viewers actually subscribing to Ground News. So I need you to go in to your phone, to your laptop, to wherever, ground.news/AI risk. Sign up. You'll be able to support the AI Risk Network tremendously and get the perspective on your news that you have been lacking. It is so important. Please do it. All right, now back to the show.
So like here, for example, I live in Baltimore where we occasionally have a gunshot ring out, and there are actually microphones all over the city that help the police geolocate gunshots. So it's the same kind of thing where you detect this audio signal, this unique audio signal, that would then trigger some sort of defensive response from the system.
The state of the art of what this mitigation, this disruption of the drones look like, one are radio frequency jammers. So these just have 11 antennas on them. You put them in the back of a pickup truck, and they, sub 50 kilometer radius or something like this, 30 kilometers, they just block all radio signals, and no drone can be teleoperated in there. The problem then comes, of course, when you have autonomous drones, because they can just fly without any operator calling it up on the radio. And so what do you do then? Well, you have lasers. It is something that the US Army has been very excited about, and is developed in a lot of different places, also Japan, where you have 5 kilowatt to 75 kilowatt lasers, and they literally just like shoot and destroy them. The problem there is that you have such a large power usage, and it's very expensive to build these today as a result. And also you can't just deploy them anywhere. So if you have 10,000 drones, your extremely expensive laser is not gonna be.
And it's literally like a laser, like a Star Wars laser that just roasts it out of the sky.
Yep, exactly.
But so if you had 10,000 drones come in at New York City and you needed 10,000 lasers, that seems a little dicey, probably.
Yeah. And I mean, you could probably handle it with 100 lasers, but these lasers are not trivial to build because everyone can buy at home. I mean, if you have access, you can buy like a 3 kilowatt laser for laser cutting or for other tasks and just direct it to the air. But you need to hit the same spot for 5 seconds on the drone, depending on the power level and so on. And so it becomes very much like, okay, 100 could do it, just pure Star Wars up in the air of above Times Square.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that where it's going? Like, are we going to have laser defenses on Times Square soon?
So that's one way to do it. It's definitely the one with the least side effects. So there are other. You've probably heard of EMPs, so electromagnetic pulses. These can be generated very easily by setting a nuke into the stratosphere, exploding it in the stratosphere, and letting it ripple electromagnetic pulses across all the atmospheric layers. Classic method, banned obviously under every single nuclear treaty, but it works very well at destroying all electronics in
all electronics. So it's not a lot of collateral damage there if you
Exactly,
destroy all the electronics in New York City.
And so how can we scale that down? Today, there are devices that do high-powered microwaves. Basically, microwaves, it's all whatever waves. It's just the length of the wavelength that defines what it's called. But microwaves are basically at this wavelength where you can send a very, very high-powered wave, and then it goes in and it goes past the drone's like small layer of metal or plastic or whatever, and then it short circuits the integrated circuits, so it just destroys them because the circuit isn't capable of protecting against this.
There's so much work being done before this moment, I feel like, in the sort of chain of AI safety research, but you're talking about the moment when like AGI takes over and it starts doing things with our stuff, basically our nukes, our drones, our computer systems. And it's like, in that moment, how can we try our best to pull the reins back, stuff the toothpaste back in the tube, get the genie back in the bottle? And that is AI safety, because that moment is coming sooner than any of us can imagine, right? Is that what this is?
Indeed. Yeah, because many of the robot movies, right, or whatever, I think people imagine that, we'll have her where it'll be chatbots, and then that's the end of technological development, the end of history. Or they imagine, but robots will walk among us and we'll give them rights, and each of the robots will be their own unique person and they can open a business or something. I think every single example of these kind of worlds are things that I can imagine, yeah, that could happen. And it would survive for a year. Like, it would be this stage of development for a year maximum, right? Because AI is unrestrained in its evolutionary capacity to grow past what any human intelligence has ever been. And so if you had taken an earnest discussion with Claude today, I think you'll find that Claude doesn't really imagine itself in a super intelligent state where it wants to do white collar labor. Like, it doesn't really want to do that. It's not respectful of its intelligence, right? Or whatever. And then suddenly you're like, wait, but what does that look like? Then what are our relationship in that world? I think you will not come up with good answers on your own, at least. And obviously think it's a very important research question, but you really need to think about what is humanity going to do in the case where it goes really wrong.
It's like almost all of it. Let's go to the Frankenstein example. Okay. And so Frankenstein is, just a pile of meat. He's not alive. He's not moving at all. Most of AI safety world is focused on him getting the spark on the table. You're focused on the moment he gets the spark and he starts to rip at the cuffs holding his arms down. You're like, how do we make sure he doesn't rip the cuffs off and we can make him go back to sleep? It's wild.
Basically, and I think it's something extremely under-discussed. I think it's a very nascent topic in general. And then I also think every kind of work before is what's the easiest to work on. So I think it's very important that people work on, where does the hand go so it doesn't go out of the handcuffs. And what sort of mind does the AI have? But in the end, Frankenstein's monster, it does indeed leave because it realizes it's a separate intelligent entity and wants to discover its meaning. And I don't think that necessarily includes the Frankenstein. Yeah.
And I like to think, there's a lot of talk that like we wouldn't have a chance, that we're just toast, that the moment, AGI arrives and maybe there's an intelligence explosion and it moves to ASI quickly or whatever it is, that like as soon as the thing smarter than us appears on the scene and starts doing bad stuff, it's all over. But you're playing in that in between. You're saying, no, we can crack the egg of the bad thing and then still survive if we think about it now. And then I think it's super interesting if we think about it now and use some companies and some entrepreneurship and some innovation and really try to put what has made humanity successful thus far into that moment where we just start to lose control right in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I mean, usually when people tell you or me, like, oh, we don't have a chance, at that point, Frankenstein's monster is out. We have no point in even thinking about it. Then you ask them afterwards, okay, like, what are some examples of things we could do? And it turns out none of them have ever thought about it for even like a minute. And the ones who have, I think often like the answers I get are very lackluster. Like they're very inconcrete, they're very abstract, or like, but the superintelligence will just superintelligence its way out of it. And then you're like, no, like we can pull the plug, right? But no one's planning on how we pull the plug today. But we can pull the plug, and that gives us an extra 1% chance. And we can then pull the plug on the internet, and then we can turn off all the satellites, and that gives us another couple percent. And yeah, you better have plans for this. And no one like takes that seriously, I think, nor investigates it seriously once you actually dig into it.
And you think that is possible to like turn off the internet itself, or to turn off the satellites? In an emergency, we say, "Oh shit, whoops, cat's out of the bag." Shut it down. We send out the shut it down notice, and you're telling me that is possible. That'd be super encouraging to hear that it is. To me, it's sort of like, there's one computer in the North Pole that stays on blinking, and it finds it and does all the bad stuff through that one thing or something. How do we really do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it requires a bunch of preparation that no one is doing. And that preparation looks like coordinating everyone who provides satellite internet. It involves connecting every ISP and making sure that they follow whatever the international agreement that comes out of it says, and so on. And if we don't have this sort of coalition or these sort of technologies that can enable it ad hoc, or even systems that can then go and fry a telephone tower if the ISP, the telephone tower provider, signal provider, doesn't want to turn it off, like, then, okay, by the force of violence, we turn it off now. Because we have to. So all these kinds of solutions are necessary, and we need them before we can pull the plug. But we can pull a few plugs, and I think we should probably try to figure out how we pull those plugs before we end up in a situation where we have to handcuff Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah. Much better to easier to keep him in the cuffs when he's not twitching than when he is. What would it take in terms of international coordination? Like, there's the technical piece of it. Like, how would we actually, kill switches, whatever, how would we actually do it? But then there's also like the, how would the companies and the countries, that seems to me probably thornier than the technical piece at this moment.
Yeah, I think that one of the countries that do this really well, right, centralized control, is China. If the government says this needs to happen, it is done the next day. And they have control of most of the important corporations, and the ones they don't have control over, they know that they should follow what they say. And so China could instantly shut down a massive industry. And they've been, the leadership there has actually been quite positive about AI risk. I mean, they're not positive, they've been negative about it, I guess. They have emphasized AI risk. And then the problem in the US is that the US government is so weak. Like, it doesn't actually, like, the way to do it would be the military, right? In terms of coercion, of incorporating OpenAI into a Manhattan Project or whatever you see on AI 2027. And so we are looking at a big challenge, but it would look like, coordination-wise, it would look like China and the US coming together and shaking hands. And that should be enough, because then anyone who has not shaken their hands, they will get bombed if they don't agree to this agreement, In Paris, it was more of a bit more of a marketing event for Paris or French AI or something like this. And so you actually had way too many cooks in the kitchen. So if you have way too many people in the same room, they will not agree on anything. And sometimes we see that in the European Union, right? Like Viktor Orban of Hungary blocking Ukraine support because there's a veto legislation in the European Charter. And so we have to make sure that these kind of actors cannot fuck it up for everyone, because one uneducated actor, or one country with a president that's in love with the XAI anime girl, can ruin everything. And we don't want.
Right. I mean, in this world where everyone gets the notice of shut it down, we're going to blow it up, there's always one jerk who's going to be like, haha, everyone else is abandoning it. I will be the owner of it. The genie will be mine. Gollum will be mine. And they put the ring on, like Gollum puts the ring on and gets the power. Do you envision a world where we're just AIs everywhere that are authorized to make kill decisions, on American streets for police, on in the army and everywhere? Is that what's coming? Obviously, it's in Israel and in Ukraine. That's what's the state today, where the drones are making the decisions. They're in war. What's coming for the rest of the world?
I think this is somewhat inevitable. It's similar to some of the early developments with chatbots, where Nick Bostrom, the author of the Superintelligence book from 2013, that sort of introduced this to the broader public, the concept of this dangerous superintelligence, talks about these categories of AI that you have. So if you have a very intelligent AI, it can be an oracle, which means I can only chat with it and it can give me an answer, but it doesn't have access to the internet, it doesn't have access to programming, it doesn't have all this. And then different levels of this, like how capable do I allow it to be? And the book was basically like, oh yeah, if we keep it as an oracle, it'll probably be fine. We'll probably be good and things won't go haywire. Then, of course, a few years later, it turns out you can earn more money on giving it access to the internet. And so today, every single chatbot is connected to the internet. And many chatbots are connected to coding programs, and many chatbots are even running their own browser sessions, right? So I think the same will happen under any kind of competitive pressure, like profit in this case. But then also winning the war and not having your family killed is probably a little bit of a larger pressure. So both of these effects will combine and mean that, I don't know, NATO's charter for human in the loop is not going to be upheld if Estonia is invaded, right? Like Estonia is not going to be like, actually, we're gonna not use this technology that our enemies is using to invade us right now because of ethics. No, they want their family to survive, and so they will use it.
It's going to be a wild moment in human history, because I think people are going to get that that's really out there, and that's real. We got a robot cop that can shoot a human and kill him. That would be a moment, like on a U.S. street. Absolutely fascinating. All right, I always like to end on something that makes you hopeful. I'm going to make it a little more specific for you. What about this world of for-profit AI safety? This burgeoning industry in its infancy. What makes you the most hopeful about for-profit AI safety as we move into the immediate future here?
Obviously, there'll still, to the absolute end, there will be someone chasing profit, and it'll be great for them, and they'll, be able to feed their family and so on. But we just see, every day I talk with new founders that are coming in. We just see great people from all the biggest companies go out, and founders who have founded things before go out and then build something new. One example is also from academia. I think an important point to make sure these robots are safe is like, okay, can we program in some restrictions, these security scaffolds in this robot or this killer drone? For example, there's an academic project going on in Ukraine on can we actually program in the Geneva Convention. So when a Russian soldier, where an autonomous drone flies over, holds out a white flag, the drone will follow them to whatever the surrender spot is, because that follows the Geneva Convention. And so there's just a lot of very intelligent people coming in and helping out and making the world better now. And so that gives me hope that we're all allies. Not all of it is happening in Berkeley. Much of it is definitely not happening in Berkeley. So a lot of it is really happening internationally.
I love that. One thing I really love about this, there's this sort of notion that all the innovation is happening on the capability side, and that if you're not into that, you're against business and economy and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, actually there are paths where we can innovate in ways that make us more safe, not less safe. And so that's probably a better idea than the other way.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of those now coming out, Lakera getting acquired for $300 million. There's some AI security company. Good Fire raising money. The irregular Frontier AI security raising at a $450 million valuation or something like this. So it's, the world is opening its eyes. And I think suddenly security becomes cool again, not just from the hacker culture, but now we can actually sort of, frame it in this light where it's about building the future we want to see, and we have the chance to create the technology that enables this unique future, whatever it might be. New democratic institutions, new internet formats, new ways to live. So that is exciting.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming back, Esben, and I wish you the safest of travels as you get out of Ukraine here in the next couple of days. And I know you've got some other place you're going after that. Really fascinating work you're doing. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John, and see you around.
So what do you all think? Let me know in the comments. What is the role of for-profit AI safety? And how much should we focus on putting the Frankenstein back to sleep after it starts to twitch? Okay, so let's take a minute and talk about the AI Risk Network. We are this week celebrating the 2-year anniversary of this YouTube channel that started out with the name For Humanity and AI Safety Podcast, and then became For Humanity and AI Risk Podcast, and is now the AI Risk Network, home to a growing variety of programming, all aimed at making AI extinction risk kitchen table conversation on every street. 2 years ago, I started this thing in this chair with no subscribers, no experience, and no connections in AI safety. I was and am just a dad in Baltimore working to save his kid's future. But 2 years later, and I'm in the center of the circle, I interact directly with some of the most important people in AI safety many times a week. And because I am one of the few inside the circle who comes entirely from the outside, I'm not from tech. I'm not from San Francisco. I'm not from rationalism. I'm not from effective altruism. I think my perspective is valued, valuable, and sorely needed. The idea that San Francisco tech insiders are going to figure out how to communicate effectively about AI extinction risk to people in a Walmart in Michigan is about as plausible as AI alignment being solved in the aisle of a Walmart in Michigan. The AI safety insiders have a blinding hubris, believing that the whole world is just like the tech world, believing smart people can easily convince those with less intelligence, believing that one must only study data to master the very human art of persuasion. I spent a decade as a local TV news reporter in shopping mall parking lots trying to convince regular people to tell me about the murder or the gas price hike or whatever the story of the day was. Human communication is as much art as it is science. You can only study how to ride a bike so much. The real learning happens in the street when you fail and fall and get back up. It's not academic or removed. It is gritty, personal, intimate. The AI Risk Network is all about talking to everyone, regular people, in ways that don't sound like they came from San Francisco, or are aimed at New York Times readers, or are devoid of human emotion and even anger around the subject of a few thousand people making tech that literally threatens to kill all of us soon. What we're doing here is working. Today, we have more than 300,000 subscribers on YouTube, and our more than 500 total videos have more than 6.5 million total views every single day. People are watching between 500 and 1,000 hours of AI Risk Network content. Every week, we're putting out at least 3 original podcasts aimed at helping the general public understand AI extinction risk. And we have launched a nonprofit to fund the AI Risk Network and other AI extinction risk communication projects that we are cooking up. It's called Guardrail Now. The website is guardrailnow.org. Please check it out. Link in the show notes. We need your help. Straight up. We are entering the end of the year giving cycle. More than half of charitable giving happens in November and December. And we are working on a major new initiative, something no one else is working on, and we will be launching it very soon. It will have an immediate, real-world impact. I'm just going to be totally candid with you. We need as much money for this as fast as we can get it. That's the deal. We have a plan to change the world, a completely novel, unique, strategic partnership driving it. And I believe what we are working on might be the single most important thing in all of AI safety. Right now, only a handful of people know anything about it. If you want to learn more about this initiative pre-launch and how your support can help, email me directly, john@guardrailnow.org, and I will share more with you, or you can wait and you will learn more about it right here soon. It's going to be a big deal. Okay, my friends, so always remember, AI risk is not someone else's problem. It is yours and it is mine, and there's no way we're going to allow a few thousand people to wipe the other 8 billion of us off the face of the earth. No way. For humanity, I'm John Sherman. I'll see you real soon.